Okay, here we go. We are spiritual beings in a physical body. That's number 1 point. We are all human, spiritual beings in a physical body. This is if you are a human being on this earth, because not everyone is exactly the same that way. Some human beings are more human than others. In other words, some human beings are more spiritual and some less spiritual, and some, no doubt, totally non-spiritual. But if you are a human being, you are meant to be spiritual, and so you actually are spiritual, right? But you are encased in a physical body, which is really your trap. The physical body is your trap, your trap. It holds you here in this physical realm, which is more limiting, I would imagine, because it is like being in a small box in comparison with being in a much larger space. You do not see the larger space, because the physical world is the physical trap of the spiritual being, I guess. Okay? So we are all, as humans, we are spiritual beings trapped in a physical body. As spiritual beings, we are not really singular. As spiritual beings, we are all connected to other humans or other spiritual beings. We are not connected to every being, only to other spiritual beings, which kind of makes sense, because as strange as it may sound, and this is only what I am led to believe in recent times, the spiritual human being is not singular. It is a hive mind, you could say. We are all connected to the other spiritual human beings, whether we know it or not. Most of us do not know it, and most of us are not aware of that connection and cannot use that connection to communicate at the present time. And this has been disconnected because the connection is now taken over, shall we say, or operating at a technical level, which is not spiritual, which is not how the humans actually operate. They operate at a spiritual level with a spiritual connection to every other human spiritual being. But this has now been taken over by technology, because we live in a technical world, and the technical world is ruled by a technical entity, God. So that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That we would then end up being conditioned to incorporate technical stuff into our life and our existence. This is, like I say, different to what we are essentially, because if we are spiritual beings in a physical body, and then we incorporate the technology into our being and into our mind, the technology becomes our way of looking at things and our thinking. This is what is now taking place. Now, what everyone thinks about it is up to them, but I think that most of us are kind of not really very aware of it, because you would probably consider yourself separate from the technology that's around you, but it isn't. It is downloaded to you into your mind. So how can it be separate from you? It is, and also the technology separates, I think, the spiritual beings from their connection to the other spiritual beings, the other human beings. Now, what I am trying to say, and what I do think, this is what I think anyway, is that at the present time, I think that there is a lot of human spiritual beings on earth, right? But I think that only a smaller amount of the percentage of these beings, these human beings that are on the planet, like I know that everyone on the planet thinks they're human, I know that, but I think in their actual mind and in their heart and in their actual thinking, I think a lot of them do actually think that they are different from other human beings. In other words, they actually sense that they are not spiritual and actually think they aren't spiritual. And whether they think that is different to others or whether they think that is good or bad, I don't know, because I can't think. I do not have the connection to them much now either, because, like I say, the spiritual connection to all the other humans is now pretty much not operating. Or at least if it's operating, it is actually operating still to some extent, but we are not aware of it. So if you're not aware that your thoughts are able to be transferred to another human being, apart from like talking to them, then that does not exist for you. And so if the other human being even receives those thoughts, they will think they are their thoughts, not something from another human, shall we say. But also what I think has happened is that the connection now is very weak because of technology, because we are using that now for our thinking and our communication. So our natural spiritual connection to another human being is actually not very strong. It is weaker. So I think what happens now is that even if I'm thinking a thought and transferring it to another spiritual human being, that human being, or even the group of human beings, and in reality it should be every human being, because as I've said, I tried to say at the start, I don't know whether I made it clear, human beings are spirit beings in a body, physical body, but they are also all connected. So they are really one, and they are all one because they are all connected, but at the same time they're still individual bits of that one. Like I'm still me, but I should be transferring all my thoughts to every other human being, human spiritual being on the planet. And I emphasise that because, like I say, not everyone is a human spiritual being. But the majority probably are. But if you do not think that you are, and if you are not aware that you are connected, and if the connections are now very weak, every thought that you think is going to every other spiritual human being. But because the connection is weak now due to technology, etc., lots of things, probably lots of things, evolution down through the years, that connection is weak. So even though you are downloading information, just like on a computer, like I say, now we are being downloaded with technology information. That is the download, where we're supposed to be downloading to each other. That's what I think. But what I'm saying is that the connection is now weak because of all the interference and stuff and whatever. So even if I am thinking thoughts right now, thinking, not just talking, thinking, they are going to every other human being, but every other spiritual human being. But because the connection is weak now, they will pick up my thoughts not clearly as they should. They should get the entire message, just like everything I'm saying now. It should be very clear, and they should get it. In fact, mentally, they should get it very clearly. But instead, they might only pick up fragments. And so therefore, because the connection is weak, they're not picking up the full message or the full thoughts. They might only pick up bits. So they'll almost be getting a jumbled version because the communication is now weak. A bit like if you had a TV set that goes on and off or something like that, or a computer that breaks down or slows up or gives you one bit of information and then another bit of information, but they're not actually related because they're not getting the whole sentence. They might just get words, for instance, that sort of thing. So if they only get, like if you only got from me a few words, like I might say, oh, that's amazing, or that is technology, you might get the word technology or amazing, but you're not getting what I'm saying about the technology or the amazing, or you're not getting the whole message. You might not get the whole paragraph or the whole page, even, whatever. In fact, if you only get the little bits that you get, will make it jumbled. So you will not be getting, it won't be that worthwhile what you're getting from me, if you know what I'm saying. Because you will not be getting a complete, clear communication. So this, I think, is what has happened now. So most human beings are unaware of the hive mind, that we are spirit beings and that we are all connected by a invisible thread, you could say. And that's, I would have to say, it's what you'd call a hive mind, because if all is one and one is all, it is like that. When I first heard this, I found it disconcerting and disturbing, and I didn't even like it, to tell you the truth, because I like to think that my thoughts are my own and that I only communicate what thoughts I want to, and that my intimate thoughts, or my thoughts that I'm not verbally expressing like to you now, shouldn't be going anywhere, much less my subconscious thoughts, which I might not even be aware of. So they also would be being transferred to other human beings on this earth. So this is kind of make of it what you will. It could even be kind of dangerous, in the sense that if you are not aware of your subconscious, which most of us aren't, because we're not advanced enough now. We've lost all our abilities, I believe, and we've lost our awareness of all these things, and we do not know what our full mind is thinking, and we do not have control over our full mind. This is largely, we live in a technical world now, where the technology is our God, and the God that does rule this earth is a technological God. So that kind of makes sense. So we bow down to technology, and that literally is true, because it is ruled by technology, even if you don't believe in any sort of God, right? But in reality, it is really actually ruled by a entity, God, that is technological, that they are not like a human total spiritual being. So we are trapped in this technological, physical world that is not really our natural domain at all. And this is why everything is going wrong for us, and this is why everything is going wrong for the earth itself, because it's a natural realm that is now a technical realm. And so that's why there is so much confusion and everything is at odds, I think. The technical God that rules is not a God of the religions that all the world worship or acknowledge or whatever, there's different religions, I know, but the God that actually does rule, because it is, it does control everything on our earth. And so I would say that is a God, because it has dominion over it all, so that's God, isn't it, if you want to look at it that way. Now, the God rules by technology now, and because the God is very, very, very advanced technology. Okay, this is very, very, very advanced technology to govern this earth. The God is not the God of most of the religions that we so-called spiritual human beings worship on this planet. The God works through the religions on the planet, but is not the God that we directly worship in most of those religions, I don't think. They're not that I know of anyway, okay? Because there could be sections of this earth where people are more directly worshipping the actual entity, but none that I know of. But he works through them and has control of most of the religions, in the sense that, how should I explain this? In the sense that there is duality, and this is a God of duality, which I think I said before. In other words, love-hate, not just love, or not just love-hate. And there's always that contrast. There's always the conflict. There's always the opposite side. And this is true of all the religions of the world. So indirectly, even though they might put a different face on the God, or might say this religion is a God of love, the actual religion itself does operate on the duality of the God, which is love-hate, not just love. And if you look at the religions, as I've said before, you can see that quite clearly, really, that you could not, it does not exist without the opposing hate. You just look at the religions and look at even their history, but just look at how they operate and how there is always that good-bad. It's not just all good, it's good-bad. You have to be, you're either good or you're bad, but it's always that. It's always all these things. Now, I know I'm getting confusing here, because it is a bit confusing, and some people would say, well, that's right, because that's the world we live in. That's natural. But I'm saying that it really probably isn't. It's just how we are told to operate, and this is how the religions operate, and the God that controls everything is a God of love-hate, and he operates through the religions. We don't worship him directly. If he did make himself known, some people would choose to worship him directly anyway, I think, but I do not know this. And some people, I do not know what they would make of it, whether they would certainly have to acknowledge that he is the God of this domain.
But like I've said before at the start of the thing, we are spiritual beings, all connected in this physical, technical domain that is not really our natural home. This is what I think. But the God that rules it is the technical God. Now, it's what I am trying to say is, as spiritual human beings, if you consider that you are that, then, you know, we have decided to actually, most of the spiritual human beings that are on the planet actually worship the technical God that rules the planet. They don't actually worship am I going to say that they don't actually worship a spiritual God, even though they are spiritual beings? I'm not sure if I'm going to say that. I'm going to leave that, I think, because it might, I don't want to be too direct, and also, you know, it might confuse or upset some people. I don't know. So I'm just saying what I think we are, and what the world actually is around us, and I think that we are at odds with that. Also, what I was going to say, even though it's a bit complicated, in the sense that I think there are a lot more spiritual human beings on the earth, but than what even they know. In other words, what I'm saying is there are, like most, we all think we're human, right? But that doesn't mean we think we're a spiritual being. Whereas I'm saying that whether you think you're a spiritual being or not, you actually are, or you were meant to be. But what has happened is you have been taken over by the more physical domain. In other words, if you were like, say, spiritual or religious, then, you know, you might agree with this type of thing. But on the other hand, if you're an atheist or an agnostic and you just believe that there's no gods and that we are the gods, which actually is kind of interesting, because what I was saying before is, at the start, we are spiritual beings, but we are all connected, you see. So in a funny kind of way, what I am saying is this actually applies to, I don't want to get you confused, but if we are all spiritual beings and we are all connected, right? But we are not connected because we have been disconnected by the belief in our physical reality as opposed to any sort of spiritual connection. Therefore, we are disconnected. But if we were fully connected, as we should be, then we operate as a whole, not as just single individuals. Because as single individuals, we are pretty much powerless. But work it out yourself. If I'm the only spiritual human being on the planet right now, or at least I'm the only one that thinks I am, right, which is not really true, but if I'm only one and a limited number when there should really be huge numbers, because the spiritual beings that all the human spiritual beings on the earth, most of, or a large amount of them, do not think they are spiritual beings, and have lost their connection anyway because of all the tech and stuff. So they are not aware that they're connected and can't connect anyway because the connection is too weak now. Therefore, they do not think they are spiritual beings. They think they are very physical beings, and probably even consider themselves to be technical beings, or even maybe even very non-feeling human beings and very non-loving human beings. And will probably even know this because their personalities have been altered by this to where they do not see themselves as spiritual beings. They still actually are. but they would probably in their head think that they are separate from some other human beings, that they might look around and think, oh, that person is more loving than me and more emotional and more this, that. But that doesn't change the fact that they are not what they think they are. In other words, they are not non-human or more intellectual, non-spirit beings. It's just that they have lost the connection and do not acknowledge the connection and do not consider themselves to be a spiritual human being. And that means that then we are all disconnected. So this causes the problem, and the God that rules the domain, he then has to step in with his technology, and then he enters into the picture to where he takes over the spiritual human being's domain and dictates how they, then he will do the thinking for you, and will become a direct God for you, whereas before, or as I think maybe we are supposed to be, we are not supposed to be connected to our technological God. We can't stop the fact that he controls the domain because it's his technological domain anyway, because it's his world. But you'd say, well, if that's the case, aren't we technological and aren't we not spiritual and aren't we should be his? Well, that that's more of a long story, I suppose, really. That depends on whether you believe that we are directly his children, or whether we were already here and then he created the domain or operates now in our domain, or took over our domain, depending on how you want to look at it, or what words you're going to use. In other words, obviously, if you want to look at it, if this entity exists and has taken total control over the spiritual human beings, then and operates through reality, through the solid world, and the physical body predominates in this world, then you'd have to say, what did the God intervene at some point with us as spiritual beings and change us to where there is more of a choice now, because there is almost, you could say, the genetics are changed or whatever, or whether it was just a total manipulation almost, but I wouldn't say that. I don't think that would fit very well. There is manipulation, but that is because the mind also is more practical, more logical, more intellectual, as opposed to spiritual, has evolved that way, or devolved that way, depending on which way you look at it. Because I would say that if we are spiritual beings and we are all connected, but now we are less spiritual and that we are all very disconnected and our communications are weak, then but the technological stuff is strong and the practical intellectual mind is strong now. Have we evolved or have we devolved? And also, can we do anything about it? Do we want to? Which way do we want to go? Because they're two separate paths in a funny kind of way. You can't really merge them, and if you do, there's loss, because if you go the intellectual technical path, you will lose most of the spiritual connection, which is what I think has largely happened. But like I say, so many human beings do not acknowledge that or think that is a reality anyway. And I don't blame them, because I'm saying this to you now, and even I feel as though I'm clutching at straws, because, I'm operating solo in a kind of way, even though I know or I think that I am putting out thoughts to other spiritual human beings, but they're not picking up a clear picture. They're only picking up fragments of what I'm projecting, because the connection has been made weak. The connection should be strong. I think that human beings should be able to project their thoughts if there had not been the interference and it's like a line that's got interference on it. You can't pick up the communication. You're only picking up fragments, and it's going to be jumbled, because if you only pick up a few words and then there's a lot of static, and then you pick up a few words, you're not going to get my whole gist. You're only going to get some of the information, and it's going to be muddled. It's not going to be clear enough. It's not even going to make a lot of sense. You probably totally misinterpret the message even. And this is what I think has happened. And so I'm just putting this out there. We are spiritual beings in a physical body. We are all connected, but now our mind is controlled and operates more by technology. And this planet is ruled by technology. This is different to spirituality. But if you hold to the premise that we are spiritual beings, but we are now operating through and with technology, this changes the complexion of our communication and has brought our spirituality down and our technological way of thinking, which is only downloaded to us anyway, I think. I don't think that that is actually our thinking. I think it is the God's thinking. Now, if you believe the God is better and knows more, as a lot of people would with gods, then you are fine, because you will be downloaded with the technological information of the gods, and you will think what they want you to think. You will behave as they want you to behave, and you will be as they wish you to be. So this is the thing. I don't know whether I put it very well. Now, there was something else I wanted to say, because I had a few points, but you see, I wanted to put them in order so that it might make a bit of sense, because that's right, because even I'm not making sense, and yet I'm communicating directly. Just 1 second. Okay. So that's essentially it. I mean, but what I'm saying is that because because the God that rules the earth is technological but also duality, that means that you are always going to have positive and negative. Everything put to you will be positive and negative. So you will always be you will often be under negative type of attack or negative type of, well, I say negative attack because it will be downloaded to you. And if it's negative, that is, you will have to try to counterbalance that with the positive. Now, this is how this world works, and most of us get it muddled up, and also most of us fall prey to the negative aspects of the God, as opposed to balancing it out, shall we say, or going totally for the positive. Now, this is a choice, because still, even allowing for, see, it's put to us, the positive and the negative, the duality, the love-hate, all that is put to us on a daily basis, downloaded to us. We have the choice, but it is very hard to make the choice when we have now given over our mind to technology to such an extent, but also to and lessened our belief in the spirituality, and do not have the connection to the other fellow spiritual human beings, because the ties have been weakened, because the communication, the wires have been weakened and almost severed. But they're still there, I think. I believe they're still there, but the communication is not clear. So therefore, we are mainly being downloaded not directly from our fellow human beings. We are mainly being downloaded from the technology, and this is good and bad. Right and wrong, love and hate. It's always the duality. That's the word that I have picked up from other videos, shall we say, because it makes sense. And we have that choice still, but if we get downloaded with all the wrong stuff, a lot of negative stuff, and we believe that to be true, and instead of operating at a spiritual level where we are only connected with all other human beings, because what I'm trying to say is that if we are all connected to other spiritual human beings, and I believe that most human beings on the earth, not all, but a large number, are human spiritual beings, even though a large percentage of those are not aware of it. They would probably consider themselves to be more technological even. They would probably even be proud of it. This is still not the case. But if they think that, they will operate that way, and therefore they will not be getting the gist of what I'm saying at all. And like I said before, I'm aware of this myself, that I'm separated too. But the only difference is I'm aware of it. And if the other human beings are totally unaware of it, then I cannot communicate with them, and they cannot communicate directly with me. They will be mainly communicating and being downloaded with whatever is downloaded to them by technology. So then they have to make a choice, but they're not going to make a choice in favour of spiritual connection, because they do not believe that they are spiritually connected to all the other spiritual human beings, because they don't feel it, they do not operate that way, they have lost that connection, as we all have. And they are not aware of it and would not even acknowledge it either. They would think that was false. They would operate under knowledge, but they would think there was no scientific basis for that, shall we say, because that's how their mind would think. So it's a bit of a problem that way, because then they still have a choice to make, but they're not going to make a choice in favour of connection to other human beings, because they do not believe that that connection is real or exists. It's even hard for me to put it across, because I'm not very good at this, to be honest. So then they're downloaded with information, and they still have a choice, because although they are downloaded to where their mind is largely taken over by the technical information, they still have the choice to make on that. But they cannot make the choice for the spiritual element if they do not believe that exists, because it's out of their realm. They've lost that connection, and they do not believe it exists. It's not in their world, you could say. So this is kind of like, how should I put it then? It'd be a bit like, it's like this. I'll try to put it this way, and I think this is how it works, but I'm trying to get it across if I can. We are spiritual beings in a physical body, and we are all connected, but we are not aware that we are all connected, most of us now. Not by a direct mental line anyway, which is what I think we are, okay? We think we communicate like I am now verbally, and that's it, and by technology, by the mobile phone, by the computer, right? Because the other lines are very weak now. And if you don't believe in it, even if it was strong, you wouldn't even use it, because you wouldn't think it was existing. If you thought you could communicate with another, if you could communicate very strongly with another human being right now, but you don't believe that line's there anyway, you're not going to be aware of your communication anyway if you were sending thoughts, even if it was getting clear, you see. So it is a bit of a dilemma that way, in that sense. Now, also it puts it like this too, that if we are spiritual beings and we are all connected, but we do not believe in that connection and we are unaware of it, and we've lost our strong connection, the line is weak now anyway, but assuming that it was even still functioning really good, if you are not aware of that and you operate at a purely practical, physical level, and that's your only belief, and you do not believe in your ability any other way, and you do not believe that exists, then you're connected to all these other beings, but you have no feeling for them. So if you are downloaded with information that another being is your enemy and has a different idea to you or something, you will operate under that, what I would call a delusion, really, because if you're really spiritually connected but you do not think you are, then that person could even become your enemy if you were foolish, because that would be your information, or that person does something bad, you download with information, that person does something bad, say, then you're like, oh, I dislike that human being, I wish that human being was gone, or I would even operate negatively towards that human being, unaware that that human being is actually the same as your brother or your sister or your father or your mother, or that it, that human being is exactly the same as a human being that you would have really strong regard for. In fact, no different in a way. So that is kind of, that's what I think anyway. But, so I'm going to leave it there, and I'm not going to go on about the God that rules too much more, except to say that, except to say that under all these conditions, human beings have a choice. they still have a choice with every bit of information they get. And, a bit like that example that I used about if I'm told that someone or something is doing something that I disapprove of, or wherever I get the information from, it will most likely be through technology, because that is what rules our world now, and that is how we get our thoughts. It changes our thinking and makes us think a certain way. Now, whether that is true or not is for people to decide. Each bit of information they get about anything, they have to decide, because they still have that free will, even though I sometimes think that if you get, like if I have certain belief systems and I am continually downloaded with all that belief system or that information, I still have free choice, but in a way it would be a foregone conclusion what choices I'm going to make if that's the information that is downloaded to me. I could well dislike my fellow spirit being that I'm really totally connected to, but I'm unaware of, due to the information I get about that spirit human being. If you follow my gist, this is just an example, because if we're all spiritual beings and we're all connected, but we're unaware of that and we're being disconnected, then you're not going to see it that way. You see something you don't like about that person, or they do something or whatever, or you're told that, because I think most of it is what information we get. But you still have a choice. The choice you make will probably go in a certain direction, unless you can stop and think and say, hey, am I a human being or am I a machine? But I'm sure even a machine would probably stick up for another machine, But like I say, it's very disconnected, and if human beings are unaware and have lost their spiritual idea that they even are that, which is very easy to do, and I've done it most of my life. So it's like, you see yourself as a physical being, and that becomes your whole realm. You do not, and you see yourself as separate from every other human being, because you are in the technological, physical, spiritual realm, which would be okay if you were a computer or a robot, okay, because that would be correct then, because you would be that way. But most human beings, not all, but most, are still spiritual beings, but they think they are not. And even, like I say, they worship different religions and things, but they are, the God that rules the planet operates through the religions, but it is a technological God. So it's interesting that they think more spiritually, but in a way, they're not really worshipping the true God, shall we say, but they think they are, and they kind of are worshipping a little bit, because he does operate through the religions. But it's still like saying, I suppose it'd be a bit like, I'm trying to put it here in a way that might seem real, it'd be a bit like, I'm trying to get it, you think you're worshipping Jesus Christ, but you're really worshipping another God. I'm hesitant to use the different religions, because they kind of have similar things, so that kind of makes it a bit deceptive, because the God that rules is not of any of the religions that we actually worship. He works through them, but he is not those gods. He is not the Jesus Christ or the Buddha or the Hindu ones or or Muslim or any of these ones. I don't even know. I'm not an expert on them anyway. Living where I am and my background, naturally I would be more familiar with the Christian type thing, okay? But, and of course in saying that, I suppose I am saying that, does that mean that the gods of those religions are not gods? Well, see, I'm not going to say that either, but at the same time, see, what is a god anyway? This is the thing. If it comes down to it, you have to say, then what is a god? See, I'm saying there is a God that rules our earth and our domain, right? Now, and I say that is God because it has total control over this domain. Total control. Total control. You know how they say that God knows your every thought and knows everything about you and all that, and that, he can do this and he's all powerful, can do, and this is how it is. I'm saying that we are different to the actual God, but he does rule this earth, our domain. Now, the different other gods that we actually have representing the true ruler of this domain, what are they then? Well, that maybe I should leave that for another video, and even I find it complicated and I can't talk on all of them. I can only relate to what I know myself, but I do think that they are all similar, have similar type of ideas. They're all operating under the duality, which is, like I say, the God of the actual controller of this earth is the God of duality, and all the religions operate under that duality. So so he works through those, but he is not a Jesus Christ or a Buddha or a Allah or whatever all the other ones are. But these, they may not even be his representatives, which is kind of funny, because that means that, I think that humans really have to have a choice there and make a choice, but how can they make a choice when they do not think there is a choice? In other words, if they, because you would be looking at two different entities, really. Like if you worshipped a certain religion, but really you've got the real controller of the world operating through that entity that you worship in the religion. Really, you'd say, well, why has not the God made himself known? He's not. We have free choice, but the God wants us to be as he wants us to be. So that is the idea. And, and we still have the choice, but, we go along with the God, but we think that we are worshipping a different God. So that would be like me being the spokesperson for the God, shall we say, or some other entity being the spokesperson for the God, even though that spokesperson, that image that we have of the God that we worship, is not really the real God that we are actually worshipping, because the real God is just using that image or that entity, that figurehead, shall we say, to get us to worship that God and therefore behave as the real God demands that we behave, shall we say, and wants us to behave, and dictates, dictates for us to behave or think and act, because that is how he wishes us to be. So this is how I see it, but I don't think I've put it very well, to be honest. But I think that it is positive and negative, and for some of us it's more negative, because if you don't go along with the God, you will be attacked much more negatively. If you go along with the God, you will be you will have a much more favourable life. You see, so because humans still have choice, and you have to say, well, why is that then? Like, why do we have choice? That's because I think that we are spiritual beings, not really physical, technical beings, and so therefore we have that conflict, and the duality, instead of working in our favour, works against us. And with the duality, you have that confusion. If there's two answers to something, you've got a choice. But, you may not be downloaded with the truth. So therefore, even truth is not going to work for you. It can even be downloaded against you. This is the duality of the world, because we're continually being tested. The gods test us completely. And most human beings, including myself, are very failing this test, because if we are spiritual beings but we deny that, and we do not acknowledge that we are all one and all connected, because that's hard for human beings to accept, that hive mind. As a hive mind, I think we could be invincible maybe, but as separate individuals we will be attacked very badly, and this is the truth, and we will not be powerful. Like, if I'm here now, I'm extremely weak because I am a lone entity, whereas I should be a hive mind with every other human being, which then I would be all powerful, and my abilities would be enhanced, and I would be aware of everything. I wouldn't need the technology for anything, because I would already be able to get the information. I wouldn't need artificial means for it. And this is only true of the spiritual beings, but I think that they make up a large amount of humanity still, but if they are not aware of it, then they will go with the technological beings, shall we say, because they will think that they are of that mind. And I think this is because of disconnection, disinformation, too much downloading, and people not being able to decipher it correctly. I know I've done that all my life, so I can understand it. So it's not a criticism, it's just a fact. But until we realise that, then we are at a disadvantage. And we're also not at full potential, because I don't think you can even make good choices until you acknowledge that and get to your full potential. Then you can make a choice. If you still want to go with the physical side, you still have that choice. But, you haven't actually got a choice if you actually are unaware that you have another side. The duality that is bombarded to us separates us from that awareness and that knowledge of that, I think. It confuses us and tricks us. And even the truth of things the truth becomes a lie, and lies become the truth. Everything becomes very muddled up. and it's for us to be tested to try to figure out what the real truth is, shall we say. And I'm putting that across, that I think that that is how things are. That's not the whole picture, I'm sure. And I certainly cannot talk about gods or things that will, because, you know, that even gets a bit beyond my realm. I don't fully understand it. But from what I gather and from what I see, and also I think that our feelings and our kind of instinct and our sixth sense, shall we almost say, that comes to us, has a lot to offer us, as opposed to the intellect and the logic which governs our world. You know, we think in terms much more, I think, of the mind rather than the spirit. Now, you'd say, what is the difference? And does the spirit exist and all this? Because this is what I thought for a lifetime too. You know, like, and it is something that is confusing. But I think also I have forgot the most important thing in this conversation, and I am actually being attacked right now. I feel very much negativity, so it's very hard for me to concentrate and speak, because I'm not feeling 100%, shall we say. I'm not at full capacity at all, and you know, I can sense the wrong connections around, and the technology that interferes with any natural abilities and connections. And it's like being always in a state of nausea or illness, as opposed to full 100% capacity, youth and health, you know. So, but at any rate, the main point too, which I should have mentioned at the start and should have been top of the list after the fact that we are spiritual beings trapped in a physical body, is that spiritual human beings create reality. I'll have to do it again, another video, to make it more clear. So you'd say, what do you mean by that? I mean that human spiritual beings create reality by their thought. The same as they can send thought to other spiritual human beings. Their thought creates the world around them. But if they are unaware that they are spiritual human beings and that their thought creates reality, then all sorts of weird thoughts would be creating reality. But you would have no control. If you do not think that your thoughts create reality, then you will not have control of your thoughts, and you will not think that if you think bad things that will create a bad reality, because you will think that, oh, it's just a thought, it doesn't matter, it doesn't go any further than my head. So this is the problem and the danger, and even myself, I have to admit that it's very hard to control all your thoughts, and if you only half believe in that ability, as even the best of us do, then you are not really creating maybe the environment that you would want to create. And also, if you haven't got control of your whole mind and your whole, like they talk about the subconscious mind, well, most of us are not even remotely in contact with that, so we wouldn't know what our subconscious thoughts are. So they could be really bad thoughts, and this could be why the world is in a very strange state too, because of the duality put onto us by the God, but also by the fact that we are not aware and cannot control our subconscious thoughts, and that we do not even know what they are. And if we are in a state of duality and confusion all the time, you can work it out yourself that we are probably in a state of fear, confusion, anger at times, and total deception almost, because we get downloaded with all the information, we get angry about it, we get confused, and we're always in a state of duality. So it's not surprising that the reality world that we live in is not that habitable in some ways, and it's more a reflection, I think, of the fact of all these points that I've mentioned, that we are just not in control of our own destiny or our own world at all. It's a false world anyway, and it is a world very much in a state of chaos in many ways, because we have the duality going on. Duality creates chaos, because if you're always in that state of love, hate, right, wrong, that is not a stable state for the human spiritual being to be in, I don't think, and I know that has been the case for myself for a lifetime, and still is the case, because even if you were able to get control of your whole mind and be aware of the fact that you're a spiritual being and that you're connected and that you create reality with your thinking, you're still not going to be above the external forces that are going to be coming down on you, because they will be negative forces a lot, because you will not the God that rules, is not of the spiritual realm. So that will be an opposition. It's a test. The God tests us all the time, and goes to extreme measures to test, and it's certainly not always positive. In fact, most of the time it comes as negative, and this makes life very difficult and confusing and hard for most of us. So even awareness is no good to us unless we can operate as a whole. And we can't operate as a whole if we are not aware that we are connected, and that is how we are meant to be, and that is the only way that we can really see everything and take control of things and create a better reality. Because if your thought creates reality but you have no control over it, and you're unaware that your thinking does create reality, much less the fact that you are also a hive mind connected to all other human beings, you see, the whole reality should be much different to what it is. And this is why the reality is so upside down in a way, and very chaotic, and then the God will take control, and you'll be mainly downloaded with information, and you won't know what to make of it, and most of the time you will react to it negatively, and then that creates a negative reality, because your negative thoughts then become negative reality, shall we say. And this seems to be how it operates. I think I've got it as I think I have. Not doing me much good. In fact, I can understand the ignorance is bliss, and the wanting almost for human beings to be taken over by other forces and guided by information and the technology and stuff, because it offers them a sense of security. But it's okay for that if you make that choice knowing that you are severing ties with what you really are, because this is what you will be doing. So you will become a different entity, and where that will take you, I'm not going to go there. You'd have to think about that for yourself, because if you can create reality and you're all connected, there's limitless possibilities. The other way, you will be only at the possibilities of the God. Okay? So that's the choice, I think, So, what you want to make of that. You just have to think about everything around you, and try to think, I think, of the whole world as opposed even to your small area, because your small area will be downloaded with information, but that is not the whole picture. Because, you know, yourself, you could live in a very small little community, but that community is not the whole world. That does not reflect the whole world. And it could be very deceptive if you were lucky enough to be living in, you know, something that was good. You might not be aware that, you know, that everything else is really going bad. And if everything else goes bad, eventually that will hit your community too. It might take a while, but, you know, that's just, I think, anyway. But, you know. Anyway, I think I'll close off now because I'm a bit exhausted, and I think you can see that I'm not looking too good. So I hope you picked up something from it. And I know, and I apologise that I'm not putting it very coherently. I meant to mention everything in a sequence. Instead, I do everything random. I can't always get it organised, and I apologise for that, because it probably makes my videos very negative, and not because there is a negativity to it anyway. But, you know, if even if something is a little bit that you don't like or don't want to hear or don't even believe, at least if it's put in a good format and put to you, you get the information and you can decide for yourself. And that's really what I wanted to do, but I don't seem to. I just keep trying, I think, because I'm not very organised that way, and it is hard for me to explain what even I consider to be the unexplainable, really. I find it hard to explain and hard to actually believe and decipher myself most of the time, because I've lived in a life where I live very much in the physical domain, and I still find it hard to escape that, because we are trapped in it. Like I said before, even if you acknowledge that we are spiritual beings, we are still trapped in this physical domain. You know, and I say trapped because, you know, most of us cannot really leave it, and we're burdened with it all the time. It infiltrates our thinking and our whole perception. And also, if we are cut off, as I say, from our other spiritual beings, that means that we are at a great loss, and that we do feel that. We don't know why we feel it. We don't know why we feel this isolation, and why we do feel like a fish out of water, and odd and uncomfortable, and even quite unhappy maybe. And I think this is because of this, because we don't know why, but I think this is because of the disconnection, and then the takeover by everything that is around us, by the physical world, and by the way we live, you know, which is not operating at the natural kind of level that I think perhaps is more conducive if you are a spiritual human being. And yeah, but you know, I've made that point, but I'm saying that even for those that don't consider themselves to be that, if they really are that, but they don't consider it or are unaware, that doesn't really change that fact that they are. It just means that they'll go further down that wrong path, or that, you know, because if you don't believe something about yourself, and you don't think it's true, then you probably won't even think you wouldn't even see it as a choice. But that is then making it very hard for the other spiritual beings to make connections, because they can't connect with people that have cut themselves off from that connection anyway, because if they don't believe there is a connection, they've cut themselves off. So how can the spiritual beings operate as a whole or connect? So it really puts a very, and then then you'll say, oh well, we'll go then for for what is around us. You'll accept the physical reality and get more immersed in that. And that's, I think, how this whole system in the world operates. it's not really a world, it's a control system of all that. We operate as we're supposed to operate, or as we're told to operate, how we are told we are supposed to operate. And we do operate that way, and we all have. I know I have, and this is how the world works. I do not think it is actually a real world. I think it is a system. You know, it's a system set up for us, but it's not actually our real world. That's what I think anyway. But like I say, how we can get round that with the way things have gone and the way things actually are, I don't know. But I think that at least if you consider it, you know, if you consider it, and if some spiritual beings that are here are able to make some other connections, it is possible, perhaps, I don't know, to then help the non-spiritual human beings who've lost that connection. When I say they're non-spiritual, they really are spiritual, but they're non-spiritual now in the practical sense because they have severed that tie. They do not acknowledge it. So then the spiritual beings have to try to take their fellow spiritual beings who have become non-spiritual human beings. In other words, it'd be a bit like someone who's very religious and then they decide to become an atheist. And they become an atheist, so they don't believe in their God anymore. So therefore, they're non-spiritual. They believe only in the physical and in the here and now and nothing else. So, well, I suppose that is how the world operates in religion. The religious people try to convert the atheists or other people to their religion, but that's really not what I'm talking about, because I am saying that I think it's a real thing, you know, that human beings really are spiritually connected. It's not about just sitting in church with other people and saying we're the same religion, so we're spiritually connected. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about a real, what I would say is a real practical, physical even connection, but it's spiritual in the sense that you can't see it. And it's a bit like the computer world that we live in, which has taken over this, I think. This has been replaced by the computer, which sends the technology through the air, whereas the human thought should be going through the air to the other humans. This is what I think, you know. But anyway, I better close off because I am feeling a little bit drained and I can